Entrenched Echoes by Oceanair 12. Chapter 5. Cracked Time. Time hadn't spoken since they left Legend's body. He knew they shouldn't have come to this temple. He just knew it, and he hadn't listened to his gut, and now Legend was... Time swallowed down the tears that were threatening to come up. He could cry later. He could do this. He had to hold this group together. Specifically, at the moment, Hyrule. The traveler wasn't taking the loss well. The Time had to pull Hyrule to his feet and away from the scene. Warriors had promised the both of them that they'd be back for the body once they found the others. Hyrule appeared to be in shock, his tears having dried, but the tracks still visible. His arms were wrapped around his stomach like he was trying to hug himself. Time wanted nothing more than to hug him, but they had to keep moving, so he settled with holding on to one of Hyrule's shoulders from behind, gently pushing him forward. Warriors was ahead, scouting for anything. His expression had been locked down, leaving that familiar blank face that Time knew so well from the previous war. As a child, Time had just thought Warriors had a heart of steel, unaffected by the death surrounding him at the time. Now, Time saw it as what it really was, a mask to hide the pure pain screaming out. Time had a feeling if he looked in the mirror, he'd have a similar expression. It was hard to determine how far they'd walked. There were some signs of puzzles being solved, which meant they should be rejoining the group soon. They were going to have to tell them about Legend. Time was not looking forward to it. Warriors opened one of the doors, revealing a large open room. He looked around, carefully checking corners and the ceiling before waiting for Time to follow him. Time thought the room was empty at first. Then he spotted a flash of blue curled up at the foot of the pillar. Wind. The boy had his knees drawn into his chest and his face buried in his knees. He looked quite dirty, tunic covered in dirt. His sword was drawn and he was sitting next to him on the ground. For one heart-stopping moment, Time thought the boy had met Legend's fate. Wind? Warriors gently called. Wind whimpered, drawing his knees closer and letting out a broken sob. Warriors hurried over, dropping next to Wind. Are you hurt, sailor? He reached out a hand to lay on Wind's knee, only for Wind's head to jerk up, eyes red from crying. He stared at Warriors for a single blink, then he scrambled back, fumbling to get up and grab his sword. Whoa, easy, Warriors pulled back. I didn't mean to scare you. Wind pointed his sword at Warriors, eyes wide and entire body trembling. Who are you? Time felt another stab of panic. Wars, back away. If Wind had lost his memory somehow, then no wonder he was jumpy. They'd have to take this slow. At least Wind wouldn't have to be hurt by the news of Legend. Wind's gaze slid to Time, and to Time's confusion, he looked relieved. Time! He looked back at Warriors with a slight frown, then down at his sword. Wait. Wind looked up at Warriors, his eyes filled with tears, and in the quietest voice Time had ever heard from the sailor. Wars? Warriors looked confused, but he nodded slowly. Sorry I scared you. Are you okay? Wind lowered his sword. To Time's horror, his lower lip began to tremble, and tears began to slide down his cheeks. I'm sorry I lost him. I couldn't. I'm sorry, big brother. And then Wind promptly burst into tears. Warriors rushed forward, dropping to his knees. He gently went to hug Wind, only for Wind to gasp, shove Warriors back, and scramble back. He looked absolutely panicked now, and Warriors looked as confused as Time felt. Wind, what's wrong? Wind pointed at Warriors. How did he touch me? Warriors tilted his head. You feeling okay, kiddo? Am I? Wind stared at Warriors like he'd lost his mind. How am I? I'm not the one who just got gutted by 4. What? Hyrule stiffened beneath Time's grip, so he assumed the traveler had been snapped out of his numb state by that particular comment. What are you talking about? Warriors demanded. What did 4 do? He killed you! Wind screamed. Right in front of me! Time had no idea what to think about that. Wind? He slowly drew closer to the boy. Warriors has been with me since we fell. He hasn't been gutted by anyone. Wind shook his head fiercely. I know what I saw! I know what I... He broke off with a sob, burying his face in his hands. Warriors caught Time's eye, the quiet question on his face. Thoughts? Time frowned. He looked around the temple, then back at Hyrule, who appeared to be struggling to understand what was happening. Fear spell of some kind? Living worst fears? Which would add up as Hyrule was the one to find Legend's body, Warriors frowned. But you held Legend's body. Did he feel real? Wind raised his head with a jerk. Legend's dead? Time frowned. He remembered the cold skin, the blood seeping into his hands, into his clothes. Looking at all three of their clothes, there was definitely dried blood present that would belong to Legend. It felt real, and we have physical evidence. Maybe a shapeshifter of some kind, Warriors thought. Maybe Four killed him and Wind just happened to walk in at the wrong time? Then why wouldn't Four try to explain it to Wind? Time shook his head. It doesn't make any sense. Wind was looking between the two of them, eyes wide and clearly lost. Somewhere behind them, another door slid open. Everyone turned to watch Twilight and Four walk into the room. Both looked like they'd been crying, with Four still sniffing it a little bit. Wind made a kind of noise between a choke and a growl. You little coward! Warriors caught hold of Wind's tunic before he could charge across the room and tried to stab Four. The two frowned at the outburst. What happened? Twilight asked. Warriors wrestled Wind to the ground, hissing something in his ear, probably about not attacking when you don't know who's your ally and who's not. That left Time to explain. How to explain? Wind thinks he saw Four kill Warriors. I know what I saw! Wind shrieked, fighting against Warriors' grip. Four frowned. But Warriors is right there. We know. Time pinched the bridge of his nose. He took a deep breath before continuing. Hyrule Warriors and I found Legend's body. Or at least we think we did. Twilight paled. Four looked ready to cry more. We found Wild, Twilight whispered. It was horrible, like someone had just... Twilight cut himself off, biting down in his lower lip. I covered him the best I could with his cloak. Warriors cursed. Time frowned. Hyrule found Legend. Wind saw Warriors. You found Wild? Time looked at Warriors. I'm beginning to lean towards the first theory. But there's physical interaction. How does that work? Warriors demanded. Another door suddenly slid open, this time from the opposite side of the room. Time turned around, expecting either Sky to have found a group or a group of monsters. He was correct with Sky. He had not expected Legend. The two of them walked in, froze at the sight in front of them. No one moved for a long moment. Then Hyrule took a step towards the group, eyes wide and voice a whisper. Legend? Legend stared at Hyrule. Really? But weren't you... Legend turned around, then jumped back about 5 feet, cursing loudly. As if Time's day couldn't have gotten more confusing, in walked another Hyrule and another, Time. The other Time stared at Time, his expression oddly blank. Okay, then. Time had nothing. Absolutely nothing. Four had underestimated Wild. That much was clear, based on the simple fact that this man had tracked him all the way through this cursed temple, and was still right behind him. Four barely had time to breathe, let alone plan. He heard the shouting first, muffled, clearly confused, and obviously from Legend. So much for subtlety. Oh well, he'll take what he can get. Four slipped his sword away and pulled out his bow and quiver. This would have to be long range, and he only had one shot at it. Literally. 3 lefts, 2 right, 1 left, second door, and bingo. The door slid open, allowing Four to hear the loud, "Everyone calm down and just no one move!" That was given by Warriors. He didn't wait for it to completely open before sliding under the door and running forward. Four had to pause for a second to make sure he didn't shoot the wrong one, because having 2 people who looked alike was hard to tell the difference between. His pause allowed the animal known as Wild to come chasing after him, his bow having been switched out for some kind of skeleton arm. Four wasn't even sure why he was surprised at this point, and let out an angry yell. Everyone's gazes turned toward Wild, with most of them pausing on Four. To be fair, he probably looked like he'd just been taking a dive in a bloodbath. Which, yeah, he kinda had. Four glanced back to watch Wild throw the skeleton arm, which he easily avoided. Four then drew his arrow back, took aim, and fired. No one had been expecting it, let alone Time. A single arrow sliced straight through the flesh in Time's neck. Another arrow was loosed before the first hit, and this one slammed through Time's good eye. The old man didn't stand a chance, dropping to the ground with a disturbing sound. His hands twitched at the arrow in his neck before falling to the ground limply. Twilight let out a broken scream, which, yeah, maybe not the best move on Four's part, but it wasn't like he could explain what was going on. And then all hell broke loose. The remaining time was standing near Warriors and Wind, staring at his doppelganger's body like he had no idea what to make of this turn of events. Legend and Sky hurriedly ran to Time's down body and tried to figure out if there was something they could do, which, no, there really wasn't. Wind broke free of Warrior's grip and grabbed his sword. His gaze turned onto Four with a promise for blood, which meant Four now had to deal with the twin blue tunic bros. His other self was starting to look at him with a look of horror and had already drawn his sword, backing away from, well, everyone in the room. Hey, remember that stupid skeleton arm of Wild's? Well, apparently it was a freaking boomerang because Four dodged it and fired off his only shots and got a quick look at everyone before suddenly being smacked in the forehead by the stupid thing. Four barely avoided Wild's pounce by rolling away. He drew his sword and backed against a wall, eyes flickering between whoever moved next. Warriors finally recovered by screaming at the top of his lungs, "Stop moving, soldiers!" Most everyone reacted instinctively, with Wild and Wind actually freezing in their steps. Wild turned around to find Twilight and Sky in the room, which probably confused him to no end, but at least Four didn't have to worry about him for a minute. Warrior slowly drew his sword and backed away from the group. All right, who here is a real Link? The question took a moment to sink into everyone's minds, but when it did, there was a slow dawning and many of the Links began to back away from the others until most were spaced a good distance from one another. Some with weapons drawn, others only fingering them while flickering their gazes between one another. 8 down, 1 to go. Something told him this was going to be the hardest one to get. End of chapter 5.